All right, welcome to today's webinar, IEP Lessons Learned with Western Washington University. We appreciate you being with us today. My name is Tim Hines. I'm the Executive Director of the University Economic Development Association. And we'll kick things off with our presentation in a few moments. I just would like to give a quick highlight, as I often do, about the University Economic Development Association and who we are. So UEDA connects its members, higher education institutions, private sector businesses, and economic development organizations. We connect those folks to resources that facilitate economic growth within their communities. Our members represent those who are on the cutting edge of modern economic development. Our 21st century economy has really evolved into an entity that behaves much differently than our predecessors. Attracting established industry is no longer a reliable route to prosperity. We rely on building that internally within talent innovation place, all that innovation, entrepreneurship, fostering talent, and creating ways to keep the regions. Obviously, their ecosystem allies to create economic opportunity within their regions, leveraging that talent innovation in place, but also recognizing the interconnectedness of all those elements. So if you'd like to learn more about our organization, as well as anything that we talked about in today's webinar, please feel free to visit our website at universityeda.org. And with that, I do want to highlight one of our programs, which is UEDA Plus. And our UEDA Plus program provides access and discounts to products and services for our members. On behalf of its members, we've, as an organization, have established some strategic relationships and negotiated some special rates and discounts and access to leading providers of valuable things to our members. So these are products and services typically, and they're available at every contact at our member organizations. So the reason why I bring up the UEDA Plus program is that the IEP process is something that's through the UEDA Plus program, and I'll explain that in 1 minute. For those of you not familiar with the IEP designation, there's about 65 or so designated institutions throughout the United States, as well as I think there's some internationally as well. That program was established by the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, or APLU. And it was established to recognize and celebrate those institutions that have exemplary contributions to regional economic development and resiliency through their work in economic engagement. Economic engagement holistically includes promoting faculty and student innovation and entrepreneurship, excelling in tech transfer, contributing to talent and workforce development, establishing strong government, university, industry partnerships, and fostering community and place development through public service, engagement, and outreach. So those institutions that participate in the IEP designation process complete a rigorous self-study of their economic engagement enterprise, and the self-study reviews existing engagement activities as well as gaps and growth opportunities, and that's often the most valuable part. We'll hear about that today. The self-study is guided by the IEP Learning Exchange, and applications can then be submitted for comment of the submission to the review committee, either for designation or if you just want to review of your application, you can do so. But it's a prestigious designation that institutions can strive for in order to showcase and demonstrate their economic engagement. So back to UEDA Plus, UEDA has the UEDA Plus program, which provides you access to the APLU product of the IEP designation. It's the same product, it's the same process. The cohorts exist together. It's just there's membership restrictions of APLU are broadened through UEDA for access to the same program. So the only difference is if you're an APLU member, you access the IEP designation through APLU. If you are unable to be an APLU member, then you would access that designation in that program through UEDA. And I'm happy to explain more about that to anyone that would like more information. And we tend to work together closely for anyone that does want to go after that designation. So with that, we'll get into the meat of our presentation today. And that is with by introducing James. So James McCafferty serves as co-director for Western Washington University Center for Economic and Business Research. In this role, he seeks to broaden the connections between the university, the College of Business and Economics, and the real world, so businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies, through student internships, classroom-based projects, and consultation projects drawing on faculty, staff, and students. His core skill areas include research, financial modeling, business development, branding, identity, marketing, finance, tax and legal issues from the lay perspective, operations, growth management, and strategic partnering. A little bit of everything, jack of all trades. James has an MBA from Western Washington University, a Bachelor's of Science in Journalism Public Relations from the University of Oregon, and is a certified global business professional and serves on the board of directors for the Association of University Business and Economic Research. So James, welcome. And I know that congratulations are also in order for you, seeing as you're the first institution to go through the UEDA Plus program to access APLU and actually receive your designation. So, you know, it's a congratulations that, you know, we're excited that you are participating in the program, have participated in the program, continue to be active in the program, and are, you know, a champion for this access. So looking forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and get my slides up here. Perfect. So, well, thank you for having me, Tim. This is going to be fun to talk about this. This was a great experience for us, and so I have shared this with a lot of folks. So I'm happy to share this with all of you in the audience as well, and hopefully you guys ask some questions as we move through here. So, I guess I started this, why would anyone find themselves more to do? Which is one of the questions I think some people may ask about going through the IEP process. It's just the process of doing it. There's a lot of work involved in it, and everyone's always busy. So I want to give you a little bit of background about Western, just because you may or may not be familiar with Western. Western's located in Bellingham, which is quite a bit north of Seattle, as you can see here on the map. We're about as close as you get to Canada without actually crossing the border. We're a mid-sized university, and there's a whole bunch of statistics there. You can think about what those mean in relation to your particular institution. For us, the geography and topology of our region is problematic. You can see a lot of blue there. You can see international boundary. There's a lot of opportunity there to engage or not engage based on just access and how to get there. We have satellite campuses in Everett. We also have one over in Port Angeles. So not exactly all close together in that regards. So we're primarily an undergraduate institution, as you saw there. A bulk of people come through College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Again, this isn't that different than most mid-sized universities. And that's the takeaway from this, is we're not that unique other than how people feel about themselves on campus. So again, the Center for Economic and Business Research, which is my home on campus, we essentially work like a consulting firm. So we bring in a ton of opportunities for students and faculty and staff to work on applied research. And so we're actively engaged in that, and we're doing that throughout the entire state and then up into Canada and then a little bit out, done a handful of national-based projects as well. We also direct the college's executive education program. And so we're engaging with businesses that way towards that executive education kind of approach. So there's significant public exposure in what we do. I do presentations all over the place pretty consistently every week. I do 2 or 3 public talks. So we get to hear a lot about what's going on, people's, the way people connect to the university. And it's very interesting to listen to someone on the opposite side of the state talk about how they connect to the university and how they view the university. And I'm always quick to remind people that when you talk to people from the outside world, they connect to a very particular part of your university. And so I always have to ask what their connection is, and then connect my statements back to wherever their connection happens to be, because they don't see the big picture, much like most people on campus as well. So the attraction to UEDA and the IEP really came from this constant interaction, both intentional and unintentional, with the university's engagement efforts. And so as we are out and about in public, talking with folks, we would hear about different opportunities and things that people were engaging or not engaging, or people's questioning why certain activities were being done in certain locations. And it was clear there was no clear coordination between these engagement efforts. And sometimes there was even direct contradictions between some of these outreach efforts that were going on across campus. And sometimes this exposed non-best practices or alignment. So we'd sit with a group of people and they'd say, well, we talked to so-and-so from the university and they told us the exact opposite, or they showed us something that was very different than this. And so it put us in this position of seeing these firsthand. And so thinking from a university perspective as a center, we really kind of keep coming back to campus with this and having conversations. This led to multiple university-wide attempts to coordinate. And the reality was there was too many differences in disciplines and targeted geography and desired outcomes to deal with it from a programmatic level, that it really needed a more of an institutional approach to think about this engagement activities. So we started looking for best practices, and that's the economist in me coming out, right? So I'm looking for things that, how do we align this, and what are our peers around the country doing to help manage this process? And what's funny is that it's the term economic development, I think, that most people don't get. You know, when I talk to people that are work with our public service things, they don't think about their engagement activities as economic development. They think of it in other terms. And so the term economic development for most people caused a misconnect to it. And so that was the trick for us, was to help people understand what they were doing more from a framework of economic development, or economic engagement was really what we used. And so I came to a UEDA annual meeting. It wasn't the first one. My colleague in the center actually had been to one or two UEDA meetings prior, years before. And so we, as we looked for best practices, UEDA came to mind. And so I made the pilgrimage to an annual meeting and spent some time walking around and talking with folks about what they were doing. My aha moment really was at the APLU table with their guidebooks. And if you have not downloaded those, I highly encourage you to do that. They really are, they're deep. They've got a lot of great information in them. There's a lot of step-by-step, but there's also just a lot of really good thinking and thoughts around those. And so as I flipped through those books and I started having more discussions with other institutions that had gone through the process, and really of varying sizes and types. And what I found was it really didn't matter if they were a mid-sized university or a large PhD granting or entity. It really didn't matter. What I wanted to understand was the difference it had made from a systemic view from them. And I kept hearing those stories over and over again from presidents and chancellors and provosts, and all the folks that come to UEDA do that. So when I got back to campus through this process, and we kind of unpacked that information and had some small conversations, our university president happened to darken my doorway one day, which is something because I'm at the opposite end of campus as he is. And so we started to have a conversation literally in the hallway outside my office, and about this. And he had come from another institution that was an APLU institution. So of course the fact that this was a designation from APLU carried a lot of currency with him. But as we talked through this and emails started flowing back and forth as we talked about how we might put this together, we made some choices that were kind of interesting. The first was that we really wanted to move through it in a year. And it was partly because of the way things were organized on campus. We felt that was possible. Now, some other campuses that may not be possible just because of the complexity of it. But we also made the choice to keep the process at a fairly high level and outside of the normal channels, because as all of us know, process, right? So we knew that we recognized right away that there were failed attempts at doing this, and they got bogged down because people used process to slow things down. And so we intentionally kept this at a high level, and we wanted to develop a plan that was informed but would be negotiated after the development rather than during. And so it was a very intentional decision on how to structure this within the university itself, and how to get to a process where we could actually re-engage with normal process. So then it was a matter of funding, which is always a treat, and then we got started. So the first thing we did was I tasked a graduate assistant in my research center to assist me, and this really was her primary function for the year. And her job was to assist me and just keep us on track. And it really honestly was probably one of the most critical parts that we did. She attended every meeting. She stayed on people for what they committed to do. She was very good at sending emails to some very high level folks on campus, and really, well, being very polite, kept them on task, which was great. And then watched the plan overall just to keep us on schedule to do that. And then we created a small committee, which were over, and I put that in quotes because you know how that works. They were over all the key components on campus. So that committee was comprised external relations, one of our vice provosts, and then of course the president was kept in the loop all the way through. And then they had other people within from external relations and the provost team that came and went as we needed those. But that gave us the authority to move through everything fairly quickly, and the flexibility of not getting bogged down, because these are all people that aren't looking to make more meetings on their calendars. So it actually was a really good win for us from a process perspective to move this forward. We followed the blueprint that's laid out in the books. We collected internal information. We conducted internal and external stakeholder surveys. Our timing was awful for our surveys, and that was one of our key takeaways. And it's just how, you know, in looking at doing this for a year, we launched a survey in middle of October. The weather and just people's schedules, just our response rate for the survey took a lot more effort than we had hoped. We actually went back and relaunched it a second time in the spring just to get a few more responses into it, because we wanted to find a little more informing. So key takeaway, watch out for your survey timing, because that was late fall is not a good option. We began the economic impact study, which was one of the pieces that really attracted us to it as economists. And we had an advantage because we do these all the time. We also get asked by the university all the time for economic impact information as they go to the legislature or other things occur. And so the actual impact study itself, the mechanics of it was a very short reach for us, but we really didn't like the way most universities do impact studies. So we jokingly refer to ourselves as the multiplier police sometimes. And it's interesting because when you look at a lot of these studies, a lot of the studies come up with the same dollars at the end of the day, despite the university. We looked at the ones within our within the Pac-12, for example. So the UW, WSU, Oregon State, University of Oregon, just worked our way down the coast. And it was ironic to us that most of them had come to the same bottom line number, even though the universities were very, very different and the inputs were very differently. And so the thing we liked about this was that there is a framework for creating a university economic impact study. And so we were able to look at that and really critique that. And then it felt much better about creating a comprehensive one, because we had the backing as being able to say, well, this is a standard way to do this. And what later, this document is going to become pivotal to getting people on board, because this is a document that was highly coveted and desired by a lot more people on campus. Some people that didn't realize this was the thing they were looking for came to realize it later, which bought us a lot of credibility and allowed us to keep moving forward. So then we began creating the blueprint for the actual IEP document and plan forward. And again, that's laid out pretty well in those documents. So I'm not going to belabor that, but the planning documents that were done by UEDA and APLU are great. And so those were really helpful as we moved on. There's meetings and lots of emails, and we focused as a committee to try and do things as much as we could by email rather than meeting, because again, it was a group of people that wasn't looking to stack more meetings on their calendars. We were able to move a lot by email, and actually the engagement probably was better than having meetings, because people could sit, do whatever was asked of them, and then come back. And the trick here was to, as we got better at this, was to ask very particular questions in emails, or very, very small tasks that could be done quickly. And so it wasn't flagged and the person said, oh yeah, I haven't got back to that in 2 weeks. It was things they could respond to right away. And that worked really well. And then the draft document, right? So we moved down and we were able to get into a draft document. After our key group had a chance to review the document and the goals within our bubble, we started sharing it outside the bubble. We shared it with the president's office. We shared it with some of the deans. We shared it with different people on campus that we knew would be influential in making sure this continued to have forward motion. What was interesting to us was that the simultaneous thing that had happened, and one of the reasons we kept this out of the mainstream process, was the university itself was going through a very, very deep process on university goals. And so the president and I, when we chatted about this, he didn't want us to get involved in that. He was afraid we'd get bogged down within that process. And so we did this completely outside of it. It wasn't informed by it. We did it completely separate. And what was interesting, both the provost and the president, if they read the first draft, they're like, this is amazing how well this mirrors our, we've gone through this multi-year process for university goals, and you've come up with very similar strengths, weaknesses, and objectives in your isolated process. So there were some minor tweaks there, but again, it wasn't minor. It was minor, but it was more informative, rather than changing, which is great. We then pulled our Carnegie materials and other similar documents from our accreditation team, which was an interesting process. We found really good alignments, again, minor tweaks. The tip here is probably to do this earlier. We probably couldn't have, because our Carnegie materials were being compiled at the same time as us. Our renewal materials were being compiled at the same time we were doing our work. So it probably would have been hard for us to do this earlier than we did. But we involved our accreditation team, which was interesting, because they got to go read through the document, and they read it from their process of seeing other forms of accreditation. So they were able to come back with some really good feedback and sort of provide some of the information that we hadn't been able to find and we're still looking for. And they were also able to provide some documentation for things that which helped us buttress our stuff. So then as we kind of started sliding into home plate here, with the impact study draft began to circulate after, because there's separate documents. So the IEP document is not the impact study. So as the IEP document was in its final formation, we began to circulate the impact study draft. And suddenly more data became available, and so edit, right? As people read it, they realized that they had information that informed the impact study they hadn't realized was useful. We also identified a lot of information that we should be collecting to do a much better impact study in another year or so when we do it again. So this is repeated for months, honestly. Every time we would present the impact study to a different group, we'd come back and wind up editing it again, just because we found more things to put into the model, which was great. So then we sent the document, I mentioned this earlier, but the final IEP submission went to our accreditation team for review. They made their final tweaks on that. We did a final review by the stakeholders, and then we were going to submit it. There was a minor pause over whether we submitted it for review or submitted it for comment. So you have a choice when you go to submit it. If you submit it for comments, you get the comments back, and then you can submit it back for review several months later in the next cycle. We went back and forth for about a week, I think, on which one we were going to do. And we opted just to go for the review. We did it for a number of reasons. The biggest one being that we felt we had a good case for this. We felt that the comments coming back from the review would help us in future submissions. And if for some reason it wasn't accepted, we still got the same comments and we could go back in and work on it some more. So we decided to do it for review, but I'll be honest with you, I talked to a number of institutions about what they chose and why, and we had conversations with our accreditation team and our provost office trying to decide which way we were going to go. It was interesting to me that we spent as long trying to decide that, what seems like a pretty simple question, but there was definitely a pause as we thought through that. So moving onward, after having get this approved and accepted and credentialed, we've been impacted by COVID-19, right? So our campus has been closed since March. Everything's been online. Staff weren't allowed on campus, et cetera. So before that happened, we were able to share the document and the work plans for the objectives laid out to key deans. So the provost office assembled a group of deans from the colleges they felt would be the most involved in launching through our work plan. And again, the biggest value for them was the impact study. I had several deans like, this is exactly what I was looking for. I can use this next week. This is great. And then we could talk about the weaknesses, and we had a sub plan on how to make it better then from them. So there was a huge buy-in on that, which again, gave us the credibility for the rest of it, which was nice. They really appreciated Path Forward and the fact they didn't have to lead it, right? So they got to participate in it and apply some resources around asking for information and those kinds of things from within their colleges, but they didn't have to oversee this. And so that again bought a lot of buy-in from them. So now we're waiting to, for when we can open our campus back up and we can start focusing on our key goals. We've put together different groups of people to work on things. They're eager to get started. Biggest challenges, of course, are time, money, and space, right? I think every university could have a banner that said that. And so it's going to be interesting. The space question is going to be interesting to me coming out of the COVID-19 because it's changing how universities are thinking about space. And so I'm interested to, when we re-engage on this conversation here, I'm interested to see if that helps us make the argument for some of the space requirements that we've asked. So our goals that we came into this, that we identified as areas we wanted to work on was our communication structure to show how the university connects that engagement question by key topics. And so we are defining what those topics are, that we're going to build web pages out essentially, and then from there collaterals, et cetera. But it's going to be all of the research and outreach and things that connect to a topic the university engages on, so that people can see how that is actually coordinated and not just 4 different people doing different things. The geographic expansion of engagement efforts, a lot of what we found was a lot of the work that we do is right around the university, right? And that's not uncommon unless you're a land-grant university where you've got offices set up all over your state. But this is a really common weakness. And so again, we are looking to align with the strategic efforts of the university. So that's more efforts down, and I mentioned Everett over on our peninsula. And those efforts have started, but again, we're kind of pausing until we get out of our world of COVID. And then, of course, increased applied innovation. This was, we are a big believer of applied research. So applied innovation and thinking about what that means was a great conversation. And what we want to create is a dedicated non-academic makerspace that's infused into campus life for first and second year students. We have the toys on campus, right? We have the 3D printers and all the, the science labs and things that people can go use and do things. But they're not marketed in a way, and they're not brought together in a meaningful way where a first year or a second year student will go and play and become interested in innovation. And we have some key folks on campus that this is a real passion point for them. And so we're looking at a couple different models that will help us bridge that gap. But again, we have to wait. So Tim, that's my show. Western's the Vikings, so you guys get a Viking hat. So
it was great. Thank you. So we do have a couple questions. I know that you had a very easy sell with your leadership, it sounds like. And I think that, oftentimes this has to be championed up the ladder. So, I'm going to ask if you had any insight on, maybe folks that have to do that, what key components would you cue in on? And I should have started by also mentioning that if you do have a question, please use the Q&A function that's in the panel, and we'll take any questions that you might have. But yeah, leadership selling it. You have any thoughts on that?
I do. For me, I was surprised by how much the economic impact study resonated with people all over campus. All our legislative people were very much happy to have that in their hands, and so that had a lot of currency that we hadn't expected. That wasn't a selling point for us. It was a pain point for us, but it wasn't a selling point, we thought. So I would say that's definitely a spot you may want to think about. Where the value is. I think the other piece of value from selling this is the coordination and the better alignment of resources, right? So you got to think about all the things that are important, and money matters. So you're spending money. Are we spending it in a way that makes the most sense for us? Does this make does this make the most sense as an institution for us to spend money this way? And then you have people engaged. And then the other thing is just it builds a better front end for the university, which again, legislators, fundraising, there are external reasons to do this. The internal reasons should be enough, but there's a lot of external reasons to engage on this. I lost you, Tim.
Now I'll unmute and ask you a question. So can you elaborate on that a little bit? Can you, because I think so many institutions within our network, at least the individuals that are involved, are looking to better tell the university story. So how, maybe some more, tangible or examples you can provide on, how has Western Washington used this? Are you putting logos in letterhead, or is there just a web page? Or I have seen some institutions throw banners up, and in what ways has this trickled into your regular communications?
So this is where we got stuck, right? So as COVID rolled out, this is where we got stuck. So we're in the process of creating a series of web pages, and for fun, as a placeholder, as like with Western Responds, and then there'd be a topic. So let's just say it's food and hunger, right? And so under that page, we would list any research that was being done or had been done, any reports. So like our center had done it's the first ever food bank economic impact study that's been done internationally. And so it's like we've done a lot of things around food pantries on campus from other programs. So could we create a way that we could showcase that, and then we were going to promote it, right? So we were going to use those to promote those into different areas. And it's also then easier for organizations to say, oh, I'm looking for a speaker on such topic, and if it's one of these areas we've built out. And so we were in the process of identifying what these areas were with the deans. As we got shut down, we were going through a process where they were starting to generate lists within their chairs, within their colleges, of saying, well, these are areas that we have stuff, so that we could start getting a macro view. And then from there, you start engaging externally, which is the idea of this, is that we continue to be able to engage externally on these topics. But then faculty and staff would then see these topics as areas of traction and start networking amongst themselves as well. So suddenly you have someone in the science labs saying, oh, well, we have research that connects with this. And then they're able to start bridging those for multidisciplinary approaches, and again, we're hoping to see more traction from that. On the academic side, that leads to publications, it leads to other things. So we were looking at this bimodal, like how can we help people internally do more, do better, but also how do we make people on the outside world see the university engaged in these different ways that they probably don't realize.
Yeah, I think that, too often, I hear that the public or the communities in which institutions are part of are looking for that doorway. So providing that doorway, I think, is something that's definitely important. Next question is about the funding. So how much was involved in your funding and that funding and go, as you put it?
Yeah, so funding was interesting because it really, it's not that much money. It really isn't. You've got, from a hard cost perspective, for us, we had the cost of a GA for a year. We had you have to pay for, is it 3 years, Tim, of UEDA membership. There's some fees associated just with that. And then there was the cost of going, we factored in the cost of going to the APLU conference to receive it. We factored in those costs. I think it was, I want to say it was $35,000. I don't remember exactly the amount. It was less than 50. And then we were able to do that, and the university did it through year-end money, which was very which there's something that won't happen this year. But they were able to fund it through year-end money, which was interesting, and we ran it through our external relations budget. Is how we funneled the money in to have this done. to do that.
Okay, so and I'll expand upon that a little bit in that, yeah, as far as introductory costs go from our perspective, as well as APLU, the IEP fees themselves are about $15,000. And there's discounts for smaller institutions, but they start at they're never higher than $15,000. That's the pre-designation fee, and then there's annual engagement fees after that once you're actually designated. And I actually go into all these fees and the structure and the calendar in a webinar we posted last month. So there's a webinar we posted on our YouTube channel on April 24th that if folks would like to go and learn more about the details, we wanted to hear experience today, but if you're looking for the details in the IEP designation, 2 ways to do that: check out that video on YouTube or reach out to me, and I'm happy to explain those to you or anyone else on your institution. Did you have any pushback from economic development organizations in the region as you asserted your economic development efforts? How did that engagement happen?
I'm going to say no, we didn't, in that the economic partners in our region are a little more fractured than in most, I think. There's a long history there, but the university has had a very prominent role, at least in our county, of economic development and economic engagement through the SBDC, through funding activities, through partnerships with our port. We actually have a business that's a partnership between the university and the port that owns land and does some different things with that land. So we had some existing credibility, I guess, in that space, where we do expect to see a little more challenges in some of the other areas as we grow our engagement in these areas where we haven't. Although preliminary, we're actually getting welcomed. I mean, like, we spoke, one of the counties that we want to increase our activity in, we actually did their economic forecast. Like, we went and did the whole stand-up routine for their big ballroom full of people. And we're starting to do research for them, and we're starting to engage. And so it's been an interesting approach because our center already had a relationship with a lot of these counties to do research. And so now to come in and say, we have other things we can add on top of our research, it's helping. But there are some communities I do suspect that we will get some pushback because they're nervous.
Sure. What about outside of economic development organizations, just new partners that you're finding as a result of the process? And I recognize that likely, with COVID, that's delayed it a bit. But have you noticed anything in particular? Even in the time, your brand value increasing?
Not at this point, just because of where we're at, right? We need some of this infrastructure built out before we're able, and both, I say infrastructure, both real stuff and digital infrastructure. We need that built out, but the impact from the deans, the impact, the discussions with our legislative folks, they all say that yes, this is going to help bring some of those people in that we may not have otherwise have been able to do. One of the projects the university is engaged in right now is a waterfront redevelopment process, and that we have a huge chunk of land as part of that I can't tell you how many different ideas have come up on what they're going to do with it. But because of the IEP process, there has been more discussion around creating some form of space where companies can engage. And I want to say I'm going to script the school, so I'll just say one of the schools in Nevada had a project I listened to them present on at one of the conferences, and I shared a lot of that information where companies come in and rent space to do R&D work, which we already do a little bit of on campus already, but we don't have the space to do it that kind of a scale. So it's going to allow scale, and there seems to be traction for that, which is nice.
Good. What, as far as you mentioned a couple of lessons learned, I think the graduate assistant was a great idea. I don't know that I've heard that in any of the other organizations that have gone through the process. So I like that, and pulling the Carnegie data a little sooner. Do you have any other things you wish you would have known before going through this process?
COVID-19 would have been good. We could have done a little more strategy around that. we've actually debriefed this a couple times with our project team, and there's not a lot we would do differently. I mean, it's, there's some timing and some things that, would have been nicer if we could have done this a little differently. The pace that we used, actually, we had intended to submit in a cohort before the one we did. And we just didn't feel like it was there, right? So we delayed a little bit, which meant I had to retain my GA, who now I've hired full-time anyway, so she's stuck. But she, we had some of those kinds of things as we move through, but that's just being flexible on it, right? I think some universities would do well with focus groups and discussion groups. For what we were doing that really wasn't going to add value, that would have added more noise into the process. And we had a lot of conversations around that. And we do a lot of focus groups anyway for things. So it would have been an easy thing for us to add in. I think that is something we'll go back to as we start to increase what we're doing in these different communities. We probably will do more discussion groups and talk about how we're engaging and do that. So a lot of the things I think some places might do on the front end, we're going to do on the back end, just because it made sense and where we were from a life cycle of being able to do this really well.
Okay. No, that's great. I don't have any more questions, but I'm sure if folks do have more questions for you or about the IEP process, I'm happy to to connect either them to you or answer those questions themselves. And you mentioned the cohorts, and I'll just give a little bit of an overview of some of those technical details about the IEP process. Right now, we're kind of in that review process, trying to understand if you have any interest in participating. Reviewing the materials, trying to work that internally within your own channels. Even before you're ready to commit, if you do have any intent of considering it, I'd suggest reaching out to me and at least connecting. We'll have a conversation between us and APLU and try to get a sense of where your institution's at and provide recommendations. When we are ready to commit, then we do have a letter of intent template that we'll share with you, as well as the actual agreement. And then you'll get those back to us. And then that letter of intent is due back October 1st. Everything is due back to us by November 1st, and then the next IEP cohort starts in January of 2021. So that's kind of what's on the radar for you. And again, if you are going to be go through APLU for the process, this is part of membership. If it's not, if you are a member of UEDA and you're not able to be a member of APLU, then that's whenever you have the application fees and the designation fees that I mentioned. So that's just one point of clarification there. So no fees if it's through APLU membership. We just provide that access through UEDA Plus. I will give you a few other small commercials here. Our awards of excellence, so those best practices that James talked about, that deadline is coming up July 1st. So if you do have an initiative that you feel fits into our awards of excellence categories of talent, innovation, and place, we strongly encourage you to submit. That'll all be part of our digital summit that's coming up September 21st through the 24th. Those best practices that we have, as well as a few small keynotes, will be all the talking heads. This is going to be an engaging conference where we're whiteboarding, we're drawing on Post-it notes, we're doing all that virtually. So it's not going to be a passive conference. It will be an active conference, and we're excited that we're still able to provide that to you in a different format this year. But I think it's encouraging with all of the ecosystem work that we're going to be doing and launching, and you'll be able to invite your ecosystems to participate in the summit and solve problems together, and who knows, maybe that it will even help launch some of the some additional IEP designees. So with that, I do want to thank you, James, for being with us today. Great insight, and again, congratulations on what you and Western Washington have put together as far as you being the first UEDA member to go through the designation process, but now you're marked and you're a resource for other people. So We appreciate you being with us today and sharing your insight, and I know that that will continue. To all those on the call or on the video, thank you for being with us as well. Any other questions, please reach out to me at tim.hindes@universityeda.org. I'll be happy to answer any questions for you. Thanks again, James. Thank you all for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.